Hello, it's Kat, and today I wanted to give a a big sign of support to Cassie and Ventura and Jane for standing up in a court system in a complicated issue such as um, coercive control abuse and where it can show up in society in our professional lives and also in our private lives. And I think that if we can get an understanding of what that is, then we can see the work that those two have done in order to get to a point where they could come into a court and openly say poignantly and honestly what has happened to them so that we can hear it. It sounds like that maybe some court officials, meaning the people who were the prosecutors, didn't file that case properly. That's a whole different issue that I'm talking about today. I want people to understand the strength that they both had in coming into that court and speaking. There was a video that was on Dr. Cochiola's feed where she was talking about, or not she was, but there was two men in the video that were talking to each other. And this one man said to the other man, well, she could have just called 911. They don't understand that coercive control and how that works because they wouldn't make that statement if they understood what it is and how it works. So when you understand things like the security guard in that case who it wasn't in the case, but it's been in the videos about the situation. He was watching with the perpetrator, a reverend, and he thought that the perpetrator was enjoying watching this reverend because he wanted to have a closer relationship with God. But that wasn't what he was told when he asked the perpetrator that question. When he asked the perpetrator the question of why he liked watching this, he said, it's because I want to know how he gets more people attracted to him. That's that coercion that's in there. That is that coercive control that Biderman talks about in the chart of coercion when you talk about Cassie and Jane and others who don't come forward because they've been isolated, because they have omnipotence in that the person, the perpetrator, thinks they're God, and the things that they do, that they've done in POW camps to hold people in places that people don't want to be held to. It's not that easy, but once you start to see the patterns, then you can understand why it's hard for people to go into court against these kind of people. Why family court is messed up and children are being raised in this and being sent to places they shouldn't be, as what happened with the three young girls that passed away in Washington State, and they're still looking for that man. Or you'll have like the young lady I was speaking to that had called law enforcement 4 times. The first time she called was because this man was outside of her apartment for 8 hours, and she called, and they said, "Well, he just wants the plant back, and he just wants the plant back, and he misses you." And when he shows up at her work, she calls. She called 4 different times, but when her white 6'5" boss that owns a restaurant called, who happened to be ex-military, called law enforcement and told them about what was going on with this young lady, then they could put out the arrest warrant. So you can't make a flippant remark of, why didn't you just call 911? Because it's not that easy. Because if it was that easy, when people saw Cassie and Jane being victimized, they would have called, because it would have been that easy. That's too easy. And as a society, we have to start to see what coercive control looks like and how it shows up in our lives. It's not as easy as what you think. And I know it's confusing when a victim uh, has that thing where they align with the abuser when they're trying to keep themselves safe. They'll send texts that say, I love you, I miss you, you're the best thing that ever happened, because that's what keeps them safe. That's why kids will come into court and say, my parent isn't this bad. But we know that when people overstep bounds in other situations, we're starting to see that. But we also got to see it when it comes to this idea of what love is. Love isn't about hurting somebody. It's about caring about the life and welfare of another person as much as you care about the life and welfare of your own. You're not sitting there watching TV trying to figure out how you can manipulate people to come closer to you. That's coercive control. That's part of coercive control. So we need to get better at identifying Biderman's chart of coercion, because that will help you. That will help people in law enforcement. We have to do better as a society about what this actually is and what it looks like. We need to stand with Cassie Ventura and Jane and other people who stand up against these atrocities. It's not right. As a society, we need to do better. Take care.